lovely Portas OBE, ladies and gentlemen. Hi. Mary, are you all right?
Well, I've just had to have a sort of a relax because Lynn Franks walked into the green room. And I write about Lynn in the book, so I've decided to let her read it out aloud because I hadn't run it past her before I wrote about her. But
Awkward.
Anyway, I'm calmed down now.
It is, I mean, we're going to go straight in because, and you can see where my orange stickies are of the bits that really stood out for me. So tell us, first of all, this is kind of a 10, it's a bit longer than 10. The 10 year is the main sort of glut of what we're talking about in this book, of your time at Harvey Nichols, really transforming that whole thing. But there's a bit at the beginning before you go to Harvey Nichols in Topshop. Tell us about Topshop before we get to Harvey Nicks.
Yeah, well, I was display manager of Topshop. And so it was the 80s, mid-80s. And it was, I was the customer. I was, 25 when I started there, Topshop, Oxford Circus. And it was at the time, at the 80s, I can remember this so vividly. It was like there was a jolt that moved the energy, the financial energy, and the kind of consumerism. This is something I'm not particularly proud of, but it's quite an important shift that happened really post-70s, which were kind of like, the music was extraordinary in the 70s, but it was quite a dour time, 3-day weeks, you know, it was just pretty shitty. And then the 80s hit, so you had Thatcher in power on one side of the pond, you had Reagan the other. You remember those films, The Wolf of Wall Street, and suddenly people had money. I mean, you know, we're looking at that now, going back, and my kids going, God, you had it so good. Did we? I don't know, but we can get onto that. And so I was at Topshop, a display manager, and it was just, I was that age, so, you know, it was just extraordinary, and fashion was just getting better, and it was before fast fashion, because that didn't really hit until the sort of late 80s. And the chairman of the time was a man called Sir Ralph Halpin. And I started doing these kind of really crazy windows, one of which was I met Boy George in a nightclub, and he said, I'll get in your windows and sing. And I was like, what? So I said, yeah, okay. And then he turned up with Marilyn, who was his sidekick. And they took so long in makeup, the store nearly closed down by the time. So I got them in the windows, but they started to get talked about, the windows at Topshop. And at that time, because of this kind of consumerist fast and money coming into, you know, what people who didn't have it before, or luxury or fashion. And what happened was, in the States, it was really, these chain shops were starting off and putting experience right at the heart of everything. So Topshop, you know, we had the DJs, you know, the DJ would be going through their music lists, you know, as much as someone on Radio 2 would before we'd open the shop. And Halpin saw this, and he used to send me across to New York to see where this really crazy, super-duper city was electric and happening, and asked me to bring this back to London. And then one day, when I was 28, he said to me, I want you to go to Harvey Nichols. And I was like, what? And I was then display manager for 400 Topshops, travelling the country in my little Spitfire and loving it. But, you know, and I'd never really seen the country before, and turning up in towns in the north that I'd never been to Wales, to Ireland. And he said, I want you to go to Harvey Nichols. And it was loss-making, Harvey Nichols at the time. And Burton Group owned it, who also owned Topshop, which most people... And I think he was seeing this resurgence that was happening. He's a very clever, canny retailer of luxury brands becoming much more widespread. Now, luxury in the late 80s was the people who had money just shopped luxury, old money. And it was loss-making, and I turned up looking like Cyndi Lauper, and everybody else was dressed like Princess Di and spoke like that. And it was like, I really just... Lynn's walked into the audience, she'll remember these days. It really was old, sort of, you know, there's a reason that Lord Mark said location, 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 because wherever you put a store, within 5-mile radius was your audience. That's completely different today, because we have the internet. And 5-mile radius of Knightsbridge was Sloane Square, you know, or Kensington or Chelsea. And so everybody that shopped had money. And it was the real Sloane Ranger time. And that was that real late 80s. And women dressed in these little frilly blouses and little knotted, they called them the Knightsbridge knot scarf. And I turned up thinking, I felt completely out of water. It was completely just shock. I never knew that people lived like this or spent money like this at all.
It is fascinating, and I was very taken by. There's like two stories happening in the book. There's obviously the story of, you know, the 90s and the fashion and the shop and the glamour and all of that, and it's brilliant. But then there's you in that, and it's quite affecting those early, you know. I mean, you talk about your first day and thinking, it's almost like there's been a terrible mistake. How am I ever going to fit in? And you don't fit in for a long, long time.
I don't think
but
I
you
ever fitted in,
kept
actually, Liz.
on sort of fighting. Where does your belief come from?
Oh, I don't know whether it
going.
was a belief. It sounds sort of like, if you write the story, I think a lot of it was fear. I think I'd lost both my parents by the time I was 19. You have no home to go back. You don't have, a weekend, I'm popping back, mum's going to cook me dinner. That goes. So that kind of emotional structure, that support system, that just goes. So you are out there and you have to make your money. You have to earn and you have to create it. So I think a lot was fear when I first started, because I knew what I was doing at Topshop, and it was tough. You know, retail's tough. Yeah. And, you know, we looked at who bought, you know, Topshop afterwards, you know, Sir Philip Green. Thank Christ I wasn't there then, but nevertheless. You know, there were tough blokes at the top of what were female businesses. Most of the buyers were women, but the men were the ones because they could do the crunching and kick ass, you know. And we're only slowly coming out of that. I mean, we're seeing that playing out in the States heavily, is that the tech bros, yeah, that's where power is. That's just not where it is. So it was really, I felt terribly vulnerable, but, you know, he had my back, but, you know, they only have your back as long as you're good. No one has your back in business unless you're delivering, and I really do know that now. But he kind of thought I was good, and I was young. But I remember, first of all, going in, you ask, how did I do this? I remember, first of all, going in thinking, okay, this is luxury, and in Sloane Street, Knightsbridge. I mean, I just had never even shopped there. You know, I trained at Harrods, but I was a junior, you know, there. And I'm in there, and I'm thinking, okay, and the first Christmas windows I designed, I thought, right, okay. I got very inspired by a film called The Cook, the Thief, by Peter Greenaway and his lover, and it was very indulgent, rich, kind of tableau vivant, and I thought, I'm going to create this window. And I had to, it's a Baroque style window. They'll get this, you know. This will be indulgent and quite sexy, but they'll get this. And I remember designing it and going to see the buying director. And the buying director was, you know, was not dissimilar to the Devil Wears Prada character. And they had all the power. No, she really wasn't.
This is Antonia.
Antonia.
Yeah.
And so she was, you know, educated at the lycée. She spoke fluent French, and she was completely different, you know, came from a very different class system to me. And I remember going in to present it, and she used to close her eyes. She'd be like this, you know, when she was talking, she would say posh, and she'd say, and I was presenting the window, and I said, I'm doing this Baroque scheme, and she went, that's Rococo. And I remember that kind of, I'm not educated in the history of art. I haven't been through this education system that she has, and the board, you know, lots of Uppingham, you know, and I just remember feeling terribly out of place. So it's not just, class played a lot at time then, you know, we're getting much, much better at that. And so how I broke it, I remember vividly going to the Whitechapel Art Gallery, and in the gallery, I was just stopped by this installation that they'd done. And it was of the Nevada desert. And in the Nevada desert is where they used to dump all old cars which were rusted and past it. They would just dump their cars. And there was these crazy dudes who worked in the desert, stacking them or, you know, taking the parts to bits or reselling them. And they had stacked these cars up and called it Carhenge. And it was like Stonehenge, but of cars. It was the most surreal, mad. And they were all standing there with these cowboy hats, fag in the mouth next to it, looking crazy. And it just dawned on me that I'm standing there completely blown by this. That's what I could do with all these windows that I've got. I could actually use it as an installation space, as opposed to, what are you buying and how do I promote it and work around, you know, your collections? And because I remember going in and her saying to me, you know, this season's haute couture, and I thought she'd coughed. I said, what was that she said? And then it's cruise. And she didn't mean P&O ferries, let me tell you. And I couldn't get my head round how I would be in that. But I saw an opportunity to move outside it and create what I thought was stuff that would just stop people in their tracks. And I put that window in. I mean, it was hilarious. We were sending my team around scrap yards. We had welders in the windows with fags in their mouth, welding these cars together. I don't think Harvey Nichols had ever seen that. But what happened when I put those in, this very good art magazine called Creative Review just rang one day and said, we'd like to do a piece on these windows. And suddenly I was in this space of where I suppose I felt most comfortable, because I originally wanted to go into theatre, was creativity and art that went into commerce but wasn't explicitly sitting within commerce.
And not everything, you're very honest in the book about not everything you tried was a rip-roaring success. There were some amazing successes that are very, very memorable. But should we talk a little bit about Barbie?
Oh, yes. Well, what happens often when businesses become successful, which we did when we started to make money, is they bring in the consultants or the money boys to sort of advise and look and just, and actually it's often where you start to lose the energy and the risk, but nevertheless they get paid big bits of money so they can sell in these ideas. But this consultants came in because we were thinking of opening up more stores, and really in a very few years this business had become successful for lots of reasons, certainly not just me, great buying, great market, just lots of reasons we'd made this very cool. And they did this research and they came back, which always happens, God, this is such a good line for Good Housekeeping readers, because they came back with the fact that where we should be promoting and marketing the business to was 35-year-old women, which to this day gets my back so much up. Because I knew the money came from 50-plus women who would, and that's where the money, when every time we looked at the sales figures, it would be Nicole Farry, it would be Max Mara, it would be Joseph, and it was the women with money, not the 35-year-olds who were normally knackered, just had kids, no money, but they thought that was sexy. And at that time, I'd read that Barbie was turning 35, so I thought, hilarious, right? So I write to Mattel and say, I'll do a Barbie window. You're the target customer for Harvey Nichols. Will you supply me with Barbies? And I'd love to make a Harvey Nichols Barbie, which would become a collector's item. And so they went, yeah, this is great. And they sent me thousands of Barbies. And we had a Barbie, Jasper Conran designed the Harvey Nichols collection for the Barbie doll, which we had and we sold, and isn't it worth a lot now? I think it's in an attic somewhere, or it's somewhere in my house. And then I got these mannequins and did them with these massive Dolly Parton wigs, tiny mannequins, dressed them these tiny little dresses. And my team had to install thousands of Barbies up the windows, down the walls, across. And they were nearly killing me. They hated me because it was just taking so long. And then one time I came down, I heard them just hammering nails into the feet of these Barbies. Just stay there. And anyway, we had thousands in the window and it looked extraordinary. It was just this buzz of just these women. And it was just fantastic. And then 2 days later, I get called in, and all these feminists are marching outside saying, close these windows down. These are setting, examples of young women, body issues. This is not what a real woman looks like. And then Anita Roddick rang me and went, what the fuck are you doing, And she had just launched this incredible blow-up doll, which was the size of real women. And I loved Anita Roddick. She was my absolute hero. So we had to pull them out nail by nail, foot by foot. So had all these Barbies with holes in their feet, and rang round all the kids' hospitals and delivered them whole-feeted Barbies, which had been ripped out of Harvey Nichols' windows by the feminists.
An amazing story. And I thought, to be fair, I thought a very good idea. I think the Jasper Conran Barbie thing was great.
Well, it was a great idea. And do you know what? We now know today press doesn't matter what you get talked about. And what happened with those windows, we often would get people moaning or writing in, but they became, absolute talking points. And they, Brian Sewell, who was the art critic for The Standard, said there's better art in the windows of Harvey Nichols than in the Whitechapel. I think he was being a bitch about the Whitechapel, but nevertheless.
You take it.
I took the credit.
We're going to talk about Absolutely Fabulous. So
I should hand the stage over to Lynn
over there. Now, we all know now, because obviously we've watched Ab Fab and grown up with it, lots of us, how much Harvey Nicks was the sort of, like they say New York is the fifth one in Sex and the City. Harvey Nicks was kind of very much there. It was a character in that show. And it's hard to imagine a world where that isn't the case. So just take us back to the beginning. How on earth did you think, I know what I'll do?
I didn't, and I didn't at all. It's, I was on a photo shoot, and there was, we were doing British designers. There was Jasper, Betty Jackson, John Rocher, and they started chatting, and they were talking about this. And Betty Jackson used to dress Jennifer Saunders. She wore a lot of Betty Jackson's clothes. And Betty started saying about this TV series that was coming out. Lynn, I hope you don't mind. And she said, don't tell anyone, but it's based on Lynn Franks. And Lynn was the PR, right, Lynn? And every designer worked with Lynn. Every brilliant, she looked after Pet Shop Boys, Annie Lennox, so Lynn, and you looked after Jennifer and Dawn, so they'd obviously used to go round to Lynn's house and saw how Lynn lived with your Buddha. And it was on him. So I said and Betty was advising Jennifer on what collections to wear, what were the designs, what should she be putting in and, being obsessed over. And I said to Betty, would she be interested? What shops was she going to, drop into the show? And would she be interested in it? Because Harvey Nichols is the store. And she said, well, why don't you ask her? I'll get her in. I'll bring her in for lunch. And she brought Jennifer in. And so I said, Jennifer, I hear you're doing this show. And she just gave me nothing. She was absolutely laconic. It was just really painful, this meeting. She wouldn't say, she said, I can't discuss it. I was like, oh my God, we've got this bloody meeting. What are we discussing, And it was just really painful. You think comedians are going to be laughing, none of it. And so I just then quickly said, look, Harvey Nichols is the store that anybody in fashion talks about. We launch all the best new young designers. You should film here. And I said, I'll make it available. You can film in the window. You do whatever you like. And she said, I'll let you know. And then she left. And then 3 weeks later, I got a fax through, and it was from Ruby Wax, who did a lot of stuff with us doing, emceeing, and I think Lynn used to do her PR as well, and Lynn introduced me to Lynn. And this fax came through, and it said, fax from Wax, because no one has faxes anymore. Fax from Wax, and, Jennifer would like your number, your office number, and I gave it to her, and then she rang and said, I'd like to film. So anyway, So she came to film, and all the lights were out, and I was working late one night. And I hadn't told the MD that I'd done this deal at all. Right. That was also a bit of a worry. And I turned downstairs, and I was working late, and I could see them filming outside. And at that time, Joanna Lumley was a classy sort of straight actress. She didn't do anything that was... And, she was purdy and light, so I thought it'd be quite glamorous. And then I just looked out. And she had a fag on and a bottle of Bolly, lipstick round here, and the wig off to the left. And I was like, oh, shit, I'm going to be fired. I am going to be fired. I think I didn't sleep for about 3 months. I kept on. And then they were getting PR before it, and the magazines were writing about it. And I was just like, oh, my God, we're going to be the biggest butt of the jokes. But we weren't, and it was probably one of the best. It made it sort of, and that Harvey Nicks, I'm going to Harvey Nicks, darling, became the sort of, the centre, that what people associated with the whole show to an extent. And it just really, overnight, you saw the difference of these young women turning up in the Mac department. And, it really was a huge PR coup, really.
I'm just going to read this sentence from one of the most breathtaking passages, I thought. And there's tons of them like this, actually, in the book. I mean, it's full of it. Hard to imagine the life, really. It says, then the music hits, the bright white light floods the catwalk and the sliding door opens. The first model stands in profile, the unicorn horn jutting out. Then she turns and strides down the catwalk as the cheers echo around. Christy Turlington, Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss follow in black feathered and netted numbers that float in the wind as being blown in by a machine attached to the roof. I mean, and that was in the store. And those unbelievable, they are the supermodels. They are the ones. What was happening there?
Well, when we were trying to build the credibility of Harvey Nichols, this was at the time when, and you look back and go, what we take for granted, so many brands, fashion brands, were seen as classic money brands. So, you know, Gucci then brought in Tom Ford to make it sexy and go into this new sort of heightened money that was coming in, and consumerism that I talk about that was happening. You know, Fendi, they were classic brands. And so all of these were getting faster and quicker. And in order to be the destination, you had to be the house of brands. You had to be this department store that had them. So doing those negotiations was always really tough. So you'd go to the New York shows, you'd go to Milan, you'd go to Paris, and then you'd go meet the designers afterwards. And the buying director was queen, because if she decided to put those designers in or got them, you know, they would send her free stuff, dressed head to toe, being fabulous. But your competition was Harrods or even Joseph. And so Harrods would go in and say, what's Harvey Nichols? Have they put in an offer? And they, you know, Dolce & Gabbana would say, yes, they're going to buy. They'd say, we'll times it by 5. And their budgets were bigger. We weren't quite in that game to be able to say it. So I worked with the buying director and said, well, you know what? We realised we'd go to the end of year, the shows, the incredible fashion shows that came out of the Royal College of Art and St. Martin's. And you'd see all these incredible designers being scooped up internationally and being taken elsewhere out of the UK, because the UK just did not get behind fashion industry in the way the Americans did and the Parisians. I mean, at that peak, you know, the ones you have these huge brands like Ralph and Lauren and Donna Karan and Calvin Klein, they were marketeers. There's 2 tenets of great brand. One is get that product right and market the shit out of it, basically. That is it, you know. And the operations is all behind the scenes, the money men. Sadly, and I'm digressing, we will get to your story, sadly, the money men take over. And actually, that is not what drives innovation, creativity, and ideas. But we've become a society where we go, that, you know, hats off to that. They know how to, you know, count the numbers, and they know how to analyse figures, but they are never the ones who go, I've got this idea, I've got this product idea, or I'm going to do this. And it's a brand and the marketeers that make it work. So I went with the buying director, to Wendy Dagworthy, who was the head of fashion at the Royal College of Art. And I went to Louise Wilson, who was the head of fashion at St. Martin's. And I said, will you tell us who you think your best designers, the big names you think are going to be of the future coming out of these colleges, and we will give them a catwalk show free in the store, which was by now really sexy. It was pulsating, but everybody wanted to come there. We'll give them free catwalk shows and give them free space in the store to kickstart their work. And we called it New Generation, New Gen fashion shows. And so the first one we did was Philip Tracy's show. He just finished, and we were like, right, well, you know. And then we just went on, the Queen, and it became amazing. And we would get the world press turning up, and the buyers from other big stores turning up to our store to see who we were saying, who Harvey Nichols was saying, watch out for these designers. And it was incredible. And we just called in the models, and the models wanted to do it for the young designers, because they'll say, no, we'll do that at a really cheap price. So you just got this wonderful, yeah, we've made it, the big models. Yeah, we're making it the big store. We're going to hold you up, the small businesses, and give you a platform, which just became this wonderful symbiosis of everybody getting behind it. So we got the world's best coverage. They got a platform. The models were there being supportive to many of those brands who were then using them, you know, hugely later on. And it just became a wonderful, energetic, creative force.
Do you think that there are stores, big or little, now that have that kind of risk, creativity, you know, that they feel like they're really art, actually, was what we were making in many ways?
I think Selfridges, which copied us and then did it really fast and brilliantly, and I say that in the nicest possible way, because there was an Italian MD called Vittorio Radici who went into Selfridges, and he really did. I remember him saying, you know, well, I'm going to do what you're doing at Selfridges, but he said it's a bit like running the bath with the plug out, because it's so big, whereas Harvey Nichols was small, and we were able to really make it. I think where innovation is coming from is really I think Selfridges did a really great job. I think innovation often comes from I think the luxury houses like Loewe did a beautiful job with Jonathan Anderson. They brought him in, but you could see that he was allowed to create. He was the creative force at the top. So the money men and the operations men were there. You support it. He's got the vision. And I think what I'm seeing it more in is small, independent ideas that are coming onto market, which I always get behind. And I think we're seeing a shift away from big and global to local and small. And I mean that, and that's slightly digressing from your question, but I think we as a society have realised, particularly post-COVID, that connection and community and shopping local and is really vital to our well-being and our social infrastructures. And I think we're moving into places, and I'm seeing a lot of smaller businesses being supported that are doing innovative, creative stuff and realising that tactile, physical interaction is much more powerful than just digitally online.
Do you think window shopping is still a thing? That is what I did on a Saturday when I was a kid. We would go with your mates into town and you'd sort of buy a burger and you'd go in shops.
You probably went to McDonald's and had a fag outside as well.
Yes. I couldn't possibly comment on the cigarette smoking. But do people still go to the shops just to be in the shops?
I think we are, yes, of course. I mean, there's two types of ways that we operate. There's hunters and there's gatherers. And the hunters are online, you know, how quickly, how fast, and what's the price here. But we as humans, we have to remember we are neurobiologically wired to connect. And we remember physical experiences much greater than we do digital. Even when you read a book, look at the way the book industry has reignited itself. Amazon went after them first of all. That was when Amazon started, it was books, and they just went, hang on a minute, this quiet little revolution where they repurposed beautiful books into collector's items, the classics. You know, the publishing houses made these works of art, and then the bookshops created coffee shops within them. I was doing a talk the other night in Now, the ones that's got wine bars in it. Who would not want a wine bar and a bookshop? I mean, all you need is a bed and you're done, really. And I'm like, this is right, and it's about us. I think we realise how much we left. Do we do window shopping? I think it's still important. I think some people do. I mean, I always every year do the Christmas windows and I go around with a mic and that thing. And last year, Bond Street was insanely beautiful. And I'm judging the Hay Christmas Windows festivals for all the independents. And everybody then sends me their windows. I think we are seeing this return. I think we realised what we lost in those times of how quick, how fast, how cheap can I get stuff. And I think we're waking up to this. And, you know, when I did my High Street report in 2011, I don't think people really understood the importance of High Street. And I don't mean that in any deprecating way. I just don't think we realised how important those social infrastructures are to us in our daily lives. And the last election, every single party put high streets on its agenda. And I just read this weekend in the Times, it's just saying they reckon that the next fight for which political party will get in will be around our high streets and how we want to live. And I think it's fundamentally important. And Lynn was talking earlier about the power that we can have as women coming together. 80% of buying decisions are made by us. You know, by women. And, you know, every pound you spend is a vote on how you want to live. And if you keep that local and you support local, and even just, you know, saying, how much am I spending online here? What am I doing? Because the impact of what it does, it stays in your community. It goes right out the fucking door when it's Amazon, let me tell you. You don't see any impact. So if you want places that are thriving, then I think it's really important that we get back to thinking about our place and our local shops.
When I potter around the market, it makes me feel really joyful. Just lovely people, hardworking, beautiful things that they've sourced carefully. And the absolute opposite emotion when I walk down my my local town to me is Banbury, and it's really sad. You know, it's almost frightening that it's just become so bleak and people looking lost. So I really, really hope you're right, because I think it would make such a difference.
Well, the only thing I have hope for, one of the things that I put in the 2011 report was that, because there was all these, when a shop pulls out, so, you know, if you look at the history of the high street, just in the last 30 years, you know, the planning laws were changed by Margaret Thatcher's government when they closed down so much of manufacturing that went offshore, and so much, you know, the steelworks, whether we were talking, you know, up north. What they did was they did this offer to businesses that you could buy these brownfield sites that were left derelict, and they wouldn't charge you land rates, right? Well, who came in? You know, the big shopping malls said, we'll buy that, or the, you know, the big supermarkets. So everyone's like, oh my God, I don't get charged for parking. I can go and I can fill my car up with half the stuff I don't need, and this is fabulous. And it drained our high streets, and then came the digital world, then came the internet. Now, there's two key things. One is, we know if we consume at this speed continually, it is going to affect Mother Earth. It is affecting Mother Earth. So this consciousness has come in. We're seeing a rise of recycled, upcycled vintage fashion, growing faster than fast fashion. Now, it's come from a very low base, but that's telling you something, that we are now moving and shifting into a space where we need less, we buy less, but we buy better. And the Labour Party have eventually, their PR department's just so shit, it's not true, but I got a call from the Today programme saying, will you come on and discuss the new Pride of Place initiative that the Labour Party have signed off? And they know that because I did work with Rachel Reeves, they know that I am their sort of spokesperson. So 2 hours later, I get the press release from the Labour Party to tell me what it is, you know, like, well done, guys. But what it was is that they have done this thing that I put into my report, which was, if a landlord leaves a shop empty, which they do, they're just waiting for the money, and they don't care. They might not live in that town. So, you know, if you're like, for example, I have a place in Stroud, and there's a shop that's been left that was Peacocks. They're not there anymore. It's been left for 3 years. The landlord's not going to sell it, doesn't care. He's just going to hold on to that, and hopefully it gets made into housing. Now, communities have a right to buy. Now, that puts power into you all sitting here, wherever you live. You can pull together, and you can get money from government to help support do that. And I work with the Plunkett Foundation, which is a rural charity which helps businesses set up, helps communities set up pubs and small shops that were pulled out when big businesses thought you're not worth our while. There's a 98% success rate if you have a community-owned shop or pub. So it's starting to open up. It's slow. Politicians are probably about 5 years behind anything else that's happening. You know, I remember when I did the High Street Report, Minette, who ran the Farming Society, said to me, I just want to tell you, you think that politicians will know more than you. They don't at all. And it's really difficult trying to impact politics, but it is moving into the right direction on high streets.
Good. That is good news. Slight handbrake turn, because I want to ask you about Christmas as well. We've just got a few minutes left. I love fashion, but I'm rubbish at it.
What does that mean?
I don't think I've ever really found a signature style. I don't feel confident when I go into a shop. You know, all of those things. And your body changes and you don't quite know what suits you and all of that. Can anyone be stylish? How do you get good at it? Did you always be good at it?
I'm not a stylist, so you're asking me. I don't.
You've always...
Nope, I learnt it.
How did you learn it?
By being in an industry where I just watched. I went to every catwalk show, and then I'd see people with bodies like me, and I think, oh, I like her look. Inés de Fressange, I love that look. What's she wearing? You know, I write about in the book where Anna Harvey, who was the deputy editor of Vogue, gorgeous woman, just, you know, she sort of took me under her wing for whatever reason, you know, and said, sort of advised me on what I should get. One of the things was, you must get a smoking Saint Laurent suit. And I was like, what? And also I had the price. I was like, dear God, you know. But I did. I waited for the sale on my discount card, and I got it, and I still wear it to this day. And it's just a beautiful black tux, you know, by Saint Laurent, and it's gorgeous. And and I've worked it, and I've learnt it. And look at me, you know, how many years ago I had an orange bob and was wearing black, moved on. And I think you can, and I think, just look at people that you think, oh, I like that. Now, does that work with my body? And you can break it down to sort of, you know, fundamental pieces. But I'm very lucky that I've worked in an industry where I'm using it all the time, you know, so it's around me. And I think when you feel comfortable, you know, you just go, oh, this feels me, you know, this feels me. And I think once you get to there, it's really wonderful. And just get rid of stuff that doesn't feel you, you know, just get, no, I'm not wearing that, give it away, or... Although I remember the other day saying to my sister, God, I love that jacket. She went, you gave it to me. I wanted to take it back. Get that right back. I must have had a few drinks.
Christmas is coming.
Yeah.
What's the plan? Do you like Christmas? Are you a Christmas person?
I love Christmas.
What will be happening in the Portas household?
Well, I'm very blessed that I have an old Cotswolds home, which is literally, I cannot tell you. I mean, I go up into the woods and we cut down, you know, ivy and holly, and you just put it, because I've got these old, you know, windows that are just put it through the metal of the windows. I have a Christmas tree that it's the same one every year, but it gets a bit bigger. They replant it for you, and I just think one day it's going to be out the window, but that comes. And we do, there's an incredible pub near us called the Woolpack, which has been reviewed too many times, but we do that on Christmas Eve, and it's just jolly, and everybody's dressed up, and there's a wonderful church on the 23rd that does these incredible St. Matthew's Passion, and does so we do that on the 23rd, and and it's great. I love Christmas. It's one of the things, you know, I think... it was so great when I was a kid, you know, I was one of 5 kids, and we had very little, but my mother was extraordinary at Christmas. You know, you'd wait and you'd just kick the bottom of the bed and you know the stocking had been, and it was a day when nobody fought. She would have none of that, you know, and you didn't fight. It was just incredible. And actually it's really interesting. I was thinking, so we had very little, but my mother would buy second-hand games. You didn't think, oh, that's second-hand, I don't love it. You just loved it, you know. And my aunts would bring around, because there's 5 of us, you know, old books that would wrap them up that were there, my cousin. Yeah, you just loved it. So it was always joyful, and I still have my mother's Christmas cake decoration.
Yeah, you talk about it in the book. It would be one of the things you'd put in your biscuit tin. We have a podcast at GH called My Life in a Biscuit, where we ask people to choose the things they would never declutter, ever, 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 no matter how much. And that was your mum's little, probably quite manky now, but means a lot to you.
My mother, Jesus. Well, it means so much, because my father remarried a year after my mother died, and then died 9 months later, and hadn't changed his will. So the old trout he married got our family home. And none of us remember leaving that day. None of us, you know. And so I was 19, my eldest brother Michael would have been 24. None of us had a memory of leaving. It was such trauma. But I took her Christmas cake how tragic, you know, that's what I took. I took her Christmas cake decorations and her cookbook, because it had her handwriting in it. I still get emotional, sorry. Yeah. So that goes on the cake every year, and no one else eats Christmas cake. And I love Christmas cake. And I go, oh God, here she goes, Mum's at it again.
Do you ice it as well, the Christmas cake?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes, I'll get the kids to do it as well. You know, it's terrible when they do it, but we all have a go at out it comes. On it goes, and that's my mum in the room.
Brilliant, brilliant. It is a time, isn't it, where Christmas, it's jolly, like you say, it's jolly and brilliant. You get together and it's chaos, but it's a sort of bittersweet
nightmare, isn't it? It's crazy.
Total nightmare as well.
Yeah.
Are you going to do you do the Christmas shopping are you the shopper?
Who's going out for it? What do you mean?
Well,
you mean
like
the
you
food
get it all done, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very organised. I'm very, very organised.
I believe that about you.
Yeah, I'm... No, I am. So I do, yes. But then now the elder kids are great, and my daughter, you know, so we all cook together, and it's wonderful. You just you know, split it up, and yeah. But I do the shopping making sure the food's in the order. I go down a week beforehand. You know, they're all working or whatever, and the young little fella comes down. So yeah. I love it, and I pace myself through it, but yeah, it's pretty exhausting stuff.
Well, it's been an absolute joy to meet you. I cannot tell you, this book is so entertaining. I gobbled it up in about 2 sittings. It's such fun, and anybody who loves shopping, clothes, or just celebrity gossip, frankly, it's packed with secrets and amazingness. It's been a real pleasure. Very Merry Christmas.
Very Merry Christmas.
Thank you for coming in.
My
Merry Portas, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to treat yourself to a book, Mary's going to be doing a signing in Waterstones over the way, so we'll see you shortly, and then we'll be back in 45 minutes. Thanks so much.